Good morning, everybody. I'm John Self. Welcome to Career Live. We got a great bit of information for you today. We're going to be talking about some developments in the market. Most of the big layoff news now is very strategic and low key, but it's very widespread. And then we'll be talking about managing across generational lines, picking up on a theme that Susie Welch had at the Wall Street Journal this week about the end of fun at work. And is that a true statement? Or is that just another sign that we're transitioning into a very dynamic time in business? So let's move in and talk a little bit about the market. You know, the job market, we're going to talk about job market news updates, the depth of fun at work, and then we're going to talk about some generational challenges for executives leading a multi-generational workforce. So let's move first to job market news. As I said, a lot of this is really strategic layoffs are continuing. Tech people at Amazon, Salesforce, Dropbox, IBM, eBay, all have announced new rounds of strategic layoffs. In battle, Tesla has announced that it was cutting 1,400 workers. They'll get 2 months pay and 2 months COBRA coverage. However, the layoff notice, the way they did it, may have violated the WARN Act. Now, if you're a regular listener regular viewer of this stream, you know that the WARN Act is a federal law that was enacted several years ago. And it's designed, and one of the provisions of this law is that you must give your workers 60 days notice if you're going to lay off more than 100 people. And so the question is, did this violate the WARN Act? Most people were caught by surprise. Musk sent out an email announcement sometime after midnight, and then pretty soon thereafter, some overnight in the morning, we're told you have 2 months pay, you're going to get COBRA benefits, and you are no longer have access. You no longer will do any work for Tesla. So it was like cut your throat, kick you to the curb. Good luck. So that's an issue to keep watching. These companies are not doing big, huge layoffs. Some of them probably should, but they're doing what we call strategic layoffs. Retail's Rent the Runway is also reducing its workforce, as are many, many others. Google is cutting back in its financial services area, and they are outsourcing some of those jobs overseas, and a substantial number were being eliminated based on they will be eliminated based on AI. So that's kind of interesting. So IBM reported some layoffs that are all AI related. J.B. Hunt, which is a bellwether of the freight market, missed revenue and profit forecast this quarter, which indicates there's a softening in the economy. People are not shipping, people are not buying, people are not shipping as much. And several other logistic companies are also reporting softening in customer demand. FedEx and UPS over the last year have been furloughing pilots on a strategic basis in certain routes. It's amazing. They are reporting a softening in overseas and domestic shipping. Okay, so regardless of the industry you're in, layoffs, what they really do, we hear about them. They don't include us. They don't affect us. We kind of shrug our shoulders. But what this does is that it intensifies the competition for the remaining management and executive jobs. Look, for example, in healthcare, 22 health systems in April announced that they would be doing layoffs. Now, some were 20, some were 15 or 12. Some were rural systems, some were bigger systems. And the interesting thing is that the job market for managers and executives is already tight. And so if we're pushing more people into the market, you can kind of have a good sense of what you're going to be dealing with. So If you are in the market, you need to continue diligently sharpening your skills and doing those things that will help you stand out from your competitors. Last night on Office Hours, we talked about how to use career journaling as a data gathering tool to help you do a better job in interviewing. If you did not see that, I encourage you to do that. That's the first. We've talked about that in the past. This is a presentation that I'll be evolving and developing. We'll be talking about it again in the future. But watch that presentation. It can help you do a better job in interviewing. So if you're in healthcare, if you're in retail, if you're in communications, if you're in technology, my God, technology is turning out to be a real, just amazing bloodbath for job loss. Last year, technology cut almost 275,000 jobs, and those jobs, many of those jobs, are never going to come back. So a lot of them were entry level programming, and those entry level programming, they're going to get wiped out by AI. Peter Thiel, the hedge fund investor, conservative businessman, he's predicting that the biggest crunch will come not to the writers of the world, but will come to the math nerds and the coders and the people like that. So as I've said in the past, if you are not decided on a college major yet, technology and business, technology may not be the way to go. In fact, if you talk about writing and painting, things like this, an AI can do a great technical job painting. But I guarantee you, if you know anything about art, and I know very little, I did art history in college, but I can tell you that you can sense in certain paintings, the successful painters knew how to put emotion, knew how to put their feelings, what they were thinking into the painting. And machines can't do that, never will be able to do that in terms of an emotional sense. Well, not in my lifetime, your lifetime, or your grandkids' lifetime, maybe after that. But I really think that, the writers, if you're a communications director, and a lot of your work has been writing, well, you're still going to do some writing, but your value will increasingly be on strategy and advising your company on the correct messaging strategies and channels. And so, there are going to be changes in some upper level jobs. A lot of those jobs will be, they'll shift in terms of focus and that sort of thing. But the lower level jobs, that's probably where you're going to see the most damage and the most discomfort. So let's now move on and talk about the death of fun at work. I'm using as an example here an essay that appeared in the Wall Street Journal. A company that I followed very, very closely in the 80s and the 90s was General Electric. Jack Welch, who took over the company, was named CEO from the longtime CEO, realized the world was changing and that for GE to survive and thrive, they would have to be a global enterprise. And so he began to cut organizations, sell off non-performing assets. You either had to be one or two in the marketplace or have a plan, if you were to be number one, to be able to keep your business in the GE family. Jack Welch was a demanding, focused, metrics kind of leader, but he also became a big believer in the value and the importance of the workforce. John, his HR director, said, he used to think of HR as just the lunch meals and benefits crowd. And he said he really developed an incredible commitment to developing the workforce. He realized that the goals of GE would never be achieved without an engaged and educated workforce. So they built something in the 50s called in Crotonville, which was the GE Learning Center. And Welch and other top GE executives would go every month and make a lecture, do a presentation. And upcoming people who showed promise at the manager, at the executive level, were invited periodically to come to Crotonville. And you learned about the values. And GE was a very tough place. You had to perform. But the values were very, very clear. And people who performed and did their jobs well and helped each other out were rewarded. And those that were not up to the match, they were eliminated. In Welch's famous sort of, there's a certain number of A employees and B employees and a lot of C's. and D's, and you need to get rid of the D's and the lower performing C's. And it was almost formulatic, and that created a lot of controversy. But Welch was all about fine tuning his workforce so he could get the maximum efficiency and effectiveness from the workforce. He was a tough guy, but his values were very clear, and he was not necessarily mean spirited. There is a story. People said, well, what do you mean he was a tough guy? One of his top lieutenants was a guy by the name of Jeffrey Immelt. You may remember Immelt. He was the guy who ran GE after Welch retired. And Immelt arguably made certain strategic missteps that led to the breakup of GE. It's now not one big company, it's three different companies, hence the sale of Crotonville. They just didn't feel like that was an investment they needed to maintain, given that there was new ways to deliver education. But plastics were the plastics division of GE was being battered by a lot of price swings and some market demand fluctuations. And Welch and Immelt played golf a lot, and they were arguably friends, and they had a warm relationship. But there's a famous note that Welch was sent to Immelt, and Welch was very much a journaler, and it was a note taker and a note sender. And he said, Jeff, I know you're having a tough year in plastics, but if you don't get it fixed, I will have to take you out. Now, there are not a lot of CEOs that would say that to a close friend unless it was their own hide on the line. But that was typical, quintessential Welch. It was about performance. If you performed, if you hit your goals, and GE was an exceptional company during this period of time, or arguably one of the best managed companies in America, then you would succeed. Anyway, they're selling Crotonville. And as Susie Welch said, without any regrets, things are changing. This was making this into a real learning center was really the brainchild of Welch, and they really, it was a place where they did celebrate their values, and this is important when you look to the future generations that we're now have in our workforce. The GE that Jack Welch created and thrived with clearly has changed, and it's been dismantled to reflect a new era. And Crotonville they were renting it out to other companies. They weren't using it as much, and now they've sold it for reportedly $22 million. Those ties with the old GE and the development processes they used to nurture their young managers and promising executives, that's now been severed. They will find other ways to do it because you must have an engaged workforce. And there were a lot of people that had great, great fond memories of Crotonville. And every month, almost without fail, Welch delivered a big lecture or a big presentation and he encouraged people to voice their opinions without fear of reprisal. And so there was a sort of a sense of trust there for a lot of the people who bought into that culture. I think to Welch said in her article, today's companies and employees are each in a boxer's crouch glaring across the ring. Well, I think that may be a kind of an extreme perspective. I can certainly see what she's saying here, and I certainly see that there are elements of that, but it's not a black or white issue. But we're in a period of transition. And when you go through a period of transition, coupled with the entry of multiple different generations in the process, you will have challenges, you will have opportunities. Now, as we move forward, if you have any questions or comments, drop them in the chat box. We'd love to hear from you. I think this is true to a certain extent, that there is now not the trusting thing that there used to be. That millennials, Gen Z in particular, view the employer with a gimlet eye. And her reasoning is, she's a professor at NYU, and her reasoning is, the new generations, particularly Gen Z, it's all about how are you going to help my career, or how much will you value my ideas? A lot of these kids believe that they are there and they will be chewed up and spit out because that's how it all works now. And too many cases, they're not really wrong. And so this is going to be, that's why you're going to see a lot of transition. Now, who is Generation Z? Okay, these were people that were born in the 90s and through mid 2000. They are a generation that grew up with smartphones. That's really, really important for you to remember. They have had the internet from birth, and they have been involved with social media since a very, very young age. So Gen Y, the millennials, grew up in the Great Recession, and it was a time of great uncertainty. I mean, we got so close to a Great Depression in the 2008 period because of the real estate bubble and the incredible bad behavior of big banking. So they now, the generation millennials, are not trusting of media. They find their own sources for news, and it's typically going to be on their smartphone. So they're not following traditional media as we know it. That's why everybody says, Walter Cronkite, if he was here today, he would really return news to what it should be. I'm not sure Walter Cronkite could be successful today because it's an entirely different mindset. The distribution channels are entirely different. Back then, there were basically 3 networks, and they basically decided what you would hear on the news at night. Cronkite's broadcast, journalistically, was pretty solid and pretty respected. There were other good shows on TV, but it was just 3. And now the competition and the diversity and the breakdown in terms of how these news is edited and how it's distributed makes it problematic. So sometimes we look to old values to restore our faith, and that's false. That's just a false prophecy, sort of a false move there. What CBS was under Walter Cronkite would probably not be successful today. Now, Z obviously is really good with technology. They are pretty savvy shoppers, and the social media companies know this, and the smart marketing know this. That's why you see influencers and micro targeting in marketing campaigns. You're going to see less and less big campaigns on TV and more campaigns targeted at certain generational groups on digital. A lot of political advertising is going to digital. They're targeting potential voters. There's an interesting thing about Gen Z too. They understand privacy issues. They embrace privacy issues, and so there will be friction about their privacy and their rights. And so you just need to be aware of that. Now, the other interesting thing I found is that one of the research of interviewing thousands of Gen Zs, a lot of them talked about starting their own business, and they worry about their future. They also take responsibility very seriously, but I would be quick to add here that taking responsibility seriously is, they see it through a slightly different lens than we did when we were growing up. So understand every generation has its positives and its negatives. I mean, we had tie-dye and acid rock. Different generations produce different things, and every succeeding generation is thought by their elders to be out of touch, and they just don't get it. Well, we finally got it and did okay. I'm not sure I think we were the consumption generation and created a lot of problems that the Generation X, the Millennials, Zs, and soon within 8 years the Alphas will have to solve. And that's kind of sad for them. And some of these problems, particularly financing, particularly budget deficits, interest rate issues, are going to be pretty big and pretty challenging. But anyway, they take responsibility seriously, but that's taking that responsibility, they see it through their eyes, which is values related, and work-life balance is very, very important. Now, when you look at communicating with your employees, the generational values, they're really driving a cultural shift. And there's a preference for different types of communication channels. And I think it's going to be really tough to bridge this gap because that's what you're going to have to do in order to harness their skills and ideas effectively. You can't communicate with them the way you communicated with your colleagues that were in your generation, that were subordinates and boomers, or even the X. The millennials and truly the Zs get information, and they want information much differently. If you're in healthcare and you're not investing into digital devices, and you're not going to make it easy for people to quickly make appointments online, not request them, but make appointments online, if you don't have the technology to have secure transition with the patients, encrypted information, then you may find yourself losing market share rather substantially. One of the problems I have with my chart, which is the Epic issue, is that it's kind of a lot of it's built on essentially old technology, and so I don't think that is the answer for how we're going to engage our patients and engage the younger generation. We're going to have to be much more clever and much more sophisticated in evolving systems, and retail providers are going to have to do that as well, as is the case with virtually every other industry. Now, one of the other issues, and we see this all the time now in engaging with millennials and Gen Z, work-life balance is important. Now, everybody defines that differently. My definition is if you're not happy at work, you can't be happy at home. And if you're not happy at home, you can't be happy at work. And that's pretty much work for me. But this is a priority for a big chunk of the millennials and a huge segment of the Gen Z. And they want not only is work-life balance a priority, but they want flexible work agreements and arrangements. And understanding this issue will be essential to retain and engage this group. I had a conversation with a friend, a retired physician, over the weekend, and we were talking about a new study that showed that a company was leaving it up to the employees whether they wanted to come back to work or not. They were taking the initiative to try to find out, what do we need to provide our employees to get them to come back? And it wasn't coffee, and it wasn't free food or dry cleaning and all the things that were done for the millennials when there was a competition for talent in the early 2000s. No, it's changing now. They want a workplace where they can come together and connect in a comfortable environment where they can meet. So this company is which is called just forgot it, left the building. Gobalent, I believe it's the name of the company. It's a big software company in Luxembourg, but they have 70 offices globally, have 30,000 employees, and what they're doing is talking to their employees and saying, okay, what kind of office structure do you want? And what they're finding is more lounges, rooms for private virtual calls. They don't want an office that's just filled with cubicles and desks to do work. That's not enticing. So if you want your people to come back and you're not willing to invest in producing a work environment that they can identify with, that they think is right, then you're going to have that conflict between mandates to return to work and people saying, sorry, Charlie, I'm not going to go that way. And so there are people leaving jobs. And because they just simply say, my values are important to me, and I'm not gonna bow. So, these generational values are really driving what I see as a big cultural shift. And one of the other things I think, and we've talked about this, and you hear it all the time in professional associations, we got to have mentors, and we have to guide our team. This is going to be increasingly important, but it's not going to be the old type of mentorship program. We're going to have to reimagine what that's all about. And it will have to be integrated into a corporate structure which basically reflects the company's need to make a profit and serve their shareholders. That's a bottom line. But we don't use that as a heavy sledgehammer to try to bend the employees to our will. And that happens a lot. And it's easy to slip into. So one of the challenges of a leader in this culturally dynamic shift is going to be understanding what these people believe, what's important to them. Keep your eye on the ball of having the value for the shareholders. But you can't achieve shareholder value on a consistent, sustainable manner unless you have a workforce that's engaged. So, another piece of employment news this week is that Gallup reported that the employee engagement, had plunged to its lowest number in a decade, 30%. That means 70%, you're paying for 70% of your workforce is not engaged. So you are paying 100% to an employee and getting 30% of really their enthusiasm, and you're probably not even getting their best effort. Why would you want to do that? Why don't you take the time to figure this out? Because this is not going to go away. If you're anchored to the idea that I can make my employees do what I want them to do and force them back into a work environment that I know is best and I think is best, and they just don't know anything. They're not going to get promoted. They're not going to have development, all those things. Companies will figure this out. And if you're trying to continue to cram down the old way and you're not meeting them and taking care of their needs, you're going to lose the best employees. And you're going to say, but I'm doing the right thing for my shareholders. No, you're not. You're not taking care of your employees. And without the employees, your shareholders are not going to be taken care of. So companies must adapt their workplaces. And it's got to be a place together, not just a room filled with desks to do work. So their leaders in today's marketplace are really facing, some really unique challenges. And I think one of the things that people have to do, and this is again, look at this through the lens of advancing your career or in finding your next better job. You have to be able to communicate in a way that reflects your flexibility and adaptability as a leader. I've always done it this way. It's always worked in the past. That's a lot of hooey. It won't work. And you're showing your generational weaknesses. And that's probably a good reason for you to get eliminated. So if you go in, even with that as an underlying attitude, you're going to find yourself at a disadvantage, because the smart people who are competing for a fewer number of leadership jobs are going to be able to have a message that says we have to be able to communicate with each generational cohort in a way that helps them respond, it helps them feel valued, and helps them feel like the company's being honest and transparent. These three generational cohorts, they all have similar. There's some similarities between each one, but there are also some big differences. So you need to understand this. You need to know. If you ask me right now to tell you what are the dates that for each generational cohort in the workforce today, I probably couldn't give you. I could get close, but I probably couldn't give you an accurate number. That should be top of mind awareness for you. You need to be aware of, if you take a job as a leader, you need to have a good generational roadmap in front of you, map your organization, and understand how you're going to be communicating to various groups. You've got to tailor your communication and your style to your audience, and that audience is not going to be a cohesive group of people. You got to do this while you're upholding the organization's value, and you better be real about it. Now, here's the real challenge, and I'm going to take my old industry as an example. Hospitals or health systems would do strategic plans, and they would bring in these high-powered consulting companies, either McKinsey, if they could afford them, or Boston Consulting Group, if they could get them, or maybe Deloitte or PricewaterhouseCoopers, or a myriad of other smaller specialty companies. And they all come up and say, well, we got to have our mission statement. My God, it looks like they all got together at a bar and wrote the same statement. Sounds pretty much the same. They change a few words, and then they say, this is your unique mission statement. It's a lodge. It's just hooey. I mean, that's just, you got to have it, so they do it, but it's not meaningful. This generation coming up, the Zs, they want meaningful mission. Keep that in mind. They want meaningful mission. And guess what else? They want you to not only have meaningful mission, but they want you to be honest about it. They want you to be transparent about it. They want you to live it. And it's not just, I'm out there on stage, I'm going to live my values, and then I go behind stage and I'm focused on the profit and banging the drum and banging heads because I want to make that number so I can get my bonus. That is a losing proposition going forward. Now, in each age cohort, I mean, there's some sort of real unique features that are going to require you to do a deep dive. And you've got to have, as I said, this cultural map at your fingertips. Not only generational cohorts in your system, your employees, but where are they in the organization? Because that's going to be really important. Your talent acquisition is going to have to adapt technology to attract and retain these younger workers. They're not interested in sitting at a desktop, and they're shying away more and more from laptops. They would rather use mobile devices. That's what they grew up with. That's what they're comfortable with. For an older worker like me, I see my phone, and sometimes I don't retain information on the smaller screen like I do on a bigger screen. And to be honest, I grew up with paper, and so although I depend on my computers extensively, for production, for writing, and all those other things, and keeping up with my company, when I'm learning, when I'm educating, I still print out articles because I'm an active reader. I have my underliners and my tab stickers, and that's just the way I learn. Okay, that doesn't make the way I learn wrong. It's just my way of doing it. It's more consistent with my generation. You have to understand, if you're a 50-year-old CEO candidate, you have to understand who's going to be in your organization. What's the breakdown by age cohort? Because you're going to have to be very adept at communicating in a meaningful, sincere, authentic way about the things that are important to them. And one other thing I'll tell you, if you drop the ball in recruiting and in keeping your employees engaged, you will see accelerating turnover. And this is a big expense. We talked about this in office hours yesterday. I encourage you to go back and look at that. And we'll be evolving that whole thought process and those ideas that we're introducing in subsequent office hour presentation. You're going to have to do more video communication. The people who are my clients, they hear me talking about this, and most of them don't do it. Well, it's just too hard. Stop complaining. Stop having an excuse. Start doing it. You will not learn unless you try and fail. Okay? So you got to get busy and do it. Video communication to applicants and employees will be really important. It's amazing how today in a lot of businesses, they're still not using communication to move people, to advance advance values, to advance initiatives. Younger people grew up with short videos. If I'm a CEO, I'm going to want to stay in touch with my employees, and I think video is one way to do it. And so that's something you've got to be, you've got to adapt. You've got to be able to do it. I think there's several steps that I think are important, and I hope you'll kind of consider these. I think you need to identify any age stereotypes that your organization may have. And we all have stereotypes. We think about the millennials and the Gen Zs, and we just kind of want to dismiss them if you're a boomer. But the truth is, our generations before us dismissed us. You need to think about, when you're putting teams together to launch initiatives, it needs to be multi-generational. And you're mentoring these people is critical for communications teams and technology. So in other words, when you've got to set up your mentoring programs so that it is multi-generational, and so that you're able to connect in an authentic, meaningful way with each generation group. Your communications teams and the technology you use must be updated, and your team must be multi-generational, because if you have a bunch of Generation X people controlling the communication, they are going to do it with their bias. And then you need to have a diverse workforce so that all the employees are included. If you do not, people want to make inclusion a bad thing. Inclusion is a smart thing. That's not about race. That's not about ethnicity. That is about being the right kind of leader to serve your shareholders and to get the returns that your company needs to achieve to stay in business. And I think you also need to you need to have benefits and reward programs and options for compensation. Not everybody's going to want to work in the old way, and I think you're going to see companies have core employees with benefits and a guaranteed salary. Then I think you're going to see employees that work on a retainer. They work remotely. Sometimes they may come into the office, and they're happy to be kind of self-employed. And that's going to be a lot of Gen Zs. For companies, that'll allow you to control your expenses. Excuse me. But it's also going to require new leadership skills. And then there'll be other workers who are just essentially contingency, just in time or on demand. So for some of these generations, I have Generation X and baby boomers who say, no, I've got to have a full-time job. I just need benefits and all these other things. And they turn down really lucrative interim jobs or contract jobs because they're holding out for what they've always known. And what you don't want to be as an employer or an employee is somebody who this is the way it's always been, and you can't let go of that. Finally, I think I want to mention Stephen Sow, who runs a management and organizational effectiveness company. Great leaders find ways to connect with their people and help them fulfill their potential. So that's a great macro statement, and it's so true. And now the challenge for you as a leader and as a job applicant is to be able to understand these dynamics that are complex, they're conflicting, they're overlapping, they're divergent. You've got to understand that. You've got to be a thought leader on communication with a multi-generational workforce, and that needs to be one of your skills that you tout in job interviews. Today, we've just covered some high points, and we're going to be developing these ideas in greater length, and I'm going to be doing some interviews with people to advance these ideas. I think their leadership today is an opportunity. It's a challenge to find those good jobs. And once you get it, there's a bit of a puzzle. You have to be a bit of a puzzle solver. I think this was a quote we used yesterday that I shared with people. That in some ways the generational shift we are seeing is reforming how we define and execute what we call leadership. So not only how we work and where we work is changing, but how we lead is changing. And we're on the cusp of a significant transformation here. And so you need to be aware. This is not going to be just burst around the corner. It's going to come around the corner slowly. But you've got to be prepared to understand those change signs and then adapt and be flexible and not complain about it. Today's workforce is going to be less cohesive regarding values and goals. Now, because some want security, some want to start their own companies. Some want to be able to work as an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur within a company in that environment. So you have to create work environments, work structures, how we work, where we work, when we work, to meet the generation. So I think this is true. If you're going to be successful going forward, you have to be a combination of teacher, conductor, and coach. And that's a real challenge. But I think that's something I hope you will all spend time thinking about. I hope you will all kind of think about how you're going to integrate that into your storytelling. So we've kind of run over time a little bit today. I apologize. I want to invite you tomorrow at 11 a.m. on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. This channels you're watching us today for your career questions. We spend about 30 minutes and we take questions. If you have questions you want us to ask us, you can send them in today at info@johngself.com. info@johngself.com. Or you can submit them live. We do not use your name. If you're in a small town, we don't use that either. We may use your first name in New York or Los Angeles or Northern California, things like this, just so people will know, that there are people out there asking where they are, so that can kind of help them kind of get a picture in their mind of the question and the answer. But if you have questions about your career, feel free to join us tomorrow at 11 a.m. It's been really an interesting session for me. I've gotten some really interesting questions, and so we hope that you will join us tomorrow, and we look forward to seeing you then.